Thank you for doing this. I always start out with having people just introduce themselves and kind of who you are, what you do.
Awesome. So again, thank you for having me. My name is Shahroor, and I am the creator of Honey Blackbird Films. I am also a writer, director, somewhat producer from time to time, and a filmmaker. Hopefully that intro was good. I think I mixed up the way that I was gonna say. I should have first said what I was and then led with the production company, but all is well. All is
I
well.
don't think, yeah, I don't, it's something that came up in a different one where it's like this idea of kind of branding yourself or like how do you present yourself kind of thing. I don't think there's necessarily a particular right answer to it. But, we do this all the time when we're networking. It's like, hey, this is who I am and this is what I do. And I'm curious kind of like what you think about in terms of how you go about doing that or how you think about that when you're at these networking events.
So funny enough, I'm not, so I consider myself both introverted, extroverted. I think that's like an ambivert or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. Same,
And
actually.
yeah, yeah. So I feel like I can become extroverted very easily when I'm comfortable with a person and also with small crowds. Well, crowd is that's a stretch, but I mean, 4 or 5 people or so and even a little bit more. But I think when you're approaching strangers in networking events, that's always daunting. I know that some people have it much easier than others, and some people have it harder than others. But what I like to do is, I mean, you've seen me there, so if you're there and you introduce me to somebody, then that's like an easy segue to kind of start a conversation with somebody. But if it's just like they're there, I think you just got to muster up the courage. Be like, hey, so I'm Shahad, or I'm like, what you doing here? Like the least awkward way. It's like, oh, by the way, what brings you to this networking event? What part of the film world are you in? What do you do? And they'll tell me, or sometimes they'll say they are just here to kind of check it out. They're not really in the film industry. And that's the door for me to kind of lean in and say, hey, I am also a writer, director. I I've worked on these films, and this is kind of my niche of filmmaking that I like to do. And this is the reasoning for why I became a filmmaker, the kind of stories that I want to tell. I think that also when you talk about the films that you want to create, that's the biggest way to kind of start a deep conversation with somebody because it could either a lot of people relate to it in their own way, right? The stories, the narratives that they want to express. I think that's the best. That's my method, but I don't go to the events a crazy amount. I like it. I feel like it's kind of like high school. Like I just like to stick with my squad of people that I know, but I like you just you gotta push yourself to talk to other people or else you're not really benefiting from the events.
Hmm, yeah. So I'm curious. So what is your niche or how do you describe the stories, your why and all of that?
I like to always say that the stories that speak most to me are stories of Palestinians and Muslims. I say specifically Palestinians because I am one, but I also like the whole general idea of telling Arab stories because we know that unfortunately it's not told in the best of ways in Western films. So I think having people who are actually part of those communities and of those ethnicities to tell the stories is the most important thing. But yeah, those are the films that I like to tell. Um, yeah.
Yeah. No, awesome. And do you feel like you have, or what would you say is your particular like superpower when it comes to directing or the projects that you make?
That's a good question. I never thought of it like that. I don't know. I think, mm, I really don't even know. I think as a director, I just try to manage the production as best as I possibly can. I think, you know what it is? Maybe starting it, because I know a lot of people have a hard time taking their idea and actually taking it into production. So I would say that's probably what my superpower. A lot of people share it as well, but that's the only thing I can think of right now, to be honest, because aside from the stories that I like to tell, I don't, as a director myself, I feel like I'm still trying to find myself and my style of directing. It's getting easier with each project, and I'm catching a glimpse of how I am as a director a little bit more each time, but I'm still in the process of trying to find that unique quality. And I think it's always harder when you're talking about yourself. Maybe if I ask somebody who's worked with me, they would give you a better description than I would, because I personally am just like, eh, I do what I try to do the best that I can on set, and just try to create that atmosphere of collaboration and allowing people to be as expressive as they can, but also having that boundary of like the director knows what he or she wants. So we want to maintain that as well, the vision. But yeah, I would just say possibly starting the process. I like to think that.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. I remember when I was younger, my brother said something like, "Oh, well, you always know what you're going to get with a Jenny Waldo film," or something like that. Like it's a Jenny Waldo film. And I was like, "What is that? Like, can you tell me what it is that I'm doing? Because it is hard to see that." And we're asked to define it so much, especially when we're writing grants or applying, trying to network with people or apply for whatever things or put together pitch decks. We're trying to explain exactly what it is that we bring to something in a different way, but it can be really hard to figure out what exactly that is sometimes or how to explain it. Um, so I'm curious about, when you're starting things, like, do you have a particular process that you go through, or is there something that starts that for you, that helps you to start things?
I'd say that when I start a project, I usually go through the norm, right? I reach out to other collaborators, people that I know that would be passionate about the project I'm working on. And I just try to be as yeah, on track the whole time, because I know when things go south or when it's not going as planned, you can kind of detach a little bit from the project and maybe not want to continue, give yourself some time, which I've definitely done, and especially with my last project, I think that one took the longest to kind of take it to production, because we were in pre-production for months on Mitamos. It was always something that came up. Something, we didn't have the proper actors, we didn't have the proper location. Mind you, it was like a whole bunch of different stuff. And I think just staying on it and being tenacious about it, because it really does take that stubbornness to keep pursuing the project. I even told my friend who co-produced the project that I didn't think it would actually happen at that point, because it'd been so long. I was like, are we ever going to get to the point where we do this? Um, but I would say I think it's also because they're pretty small projects, right? Like the independent film world, you usually don't have like a whole bunch of people. It's just about all being on the same page. I it's I really just take the story. I'm like, okay, how can we make this happen? What space do we need? Who do I need to work with? Who can I reach out to? And then when I do, I delegate, right? So I ask them, do you know the people that can be a part of this project that can help with A, B, or C? And they usually do, or they'll reach out to other people who can find those resources. And yeah, it's just really about setting up the dates and times. And so I'm trying to think if there's like something specific. But usually that's the process, at least in pre-production. When you're in production, it's just about working with the right, what do you call it, team of crews that are there, the camera department, the actors, the sound people, all the people you got on set. And again, just letting them know what you need out of the scene or what you need out of the shot. Mm, I know I'm trying to think if there's anything like unique about it, but uh, so far it's just as straightforward as that. I can't think again, I don't know why. I think I'm having a difficult time trying to figure out what is unique about it. But I also think that the person doing it, no matter who it is always going to be unique because it's done through their perspective and their way. So it can be, you could do the same method. Two directors can do the same method, but have completely different outcomes because it's them doing it, right? So I think my perspective as a Palestinian Muslim female director, writer is going to be different than somebody else's um, directorial debut or directed project. So yeah, that's that's my process and the way that I kind of roll into it. I direct my own. I was about to say I edit my own stuff as well. So most of the time, I think for the last project, I had somebody come on and edit it as well, which was difficult because it's my baby and I've always been the one who's very hands-on and editing the stuff. But it's it's really just about having those conversations with people and letting them in on the vision that you have and kind of helping them imagine what you're imagining or as close to it as possible, right? But yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we were talking about this earlier, the thinking about kind of how somebody else does it and then thinking about how you might do it. What are there any kind of influences or things that you've kind of thought about, either kind of in terms of I want to do it like that, or I definitely want to do it differently than that? Like, is there anything that you keep in mind from other directors that you've followed or loved their stuff or whatever that's influenced you?
Yeah, so I would say, especially in the beginning, I'm still kind of in the beginning, right? But it feels like everybody that's creating something you're kind of looking up to. And I know it sounds weird. It doesn't even necessarily mean it has to be the best thing, but just because you see that somebody's doing it and they've made it, like, oh, I got to do it this way. So you try to emulate whatever it is they've done. But I definitely think now that I've created more of a voice for myself in this line of work, I know more about the projects that I like to use as that, stepping stone to kind of create what I want to create or look up to, like you mentioned. But I always mention this person's name, and I think I've said her name a lot. But Ava DuVernay, I love her work and I love the stories that she tells. I think I mention her a lot because honestly, her series, her mini series, When They See Us, when I first watched that, I remember just bawling so hard after I think a couple of episodes. And I remember thinking about the story of the boys that went through that experience for days after. So I wondered to myself if, and I remember even while I was watching, I was like, this is the kind of writer director I want to be. Because if I feel this way after watching this show, I can't imagine how if I was able to do that with the stories that I want to tell, right? With the Muslim Palestinian stories, how many people will leave watching after watching this and kind of sit with that and want to know more about what's going on or who these people are, their experiences rather than the propaganda that's put up against us. So I think that's why I look up to her so much and I mention her so much. It's just I remember like the stamp that she left after watching that show. And I remember just being so depressed, so depressed afterwards. And of course, there are other stuff as well. I think I recently watched um, Nickel Boys. Have you seen that movie?
I haven't seen it yet, but yeah,
You
I've heard.
haven't seen it? Okay. So I think it's just because it's the most recent thing I've seen. And after watching that film, the way that it ended, I remember just going on the internet and wanting to Google everything that happened in real life. So I feel like once the audience member wants to know more about the people in real life, then I've done my job, right? So you want them to empathize and feel with the characters that they're watching 100%. But I feel like my goal is to have them take that that compulsion and that intense, deep connection with these characters and kind of moving it and putting it onto the people that are really experiencing what the characters are in the film or show. So kind of lost my train of thought. But yeah, that is what I feel like. That's why I think people like Ava DuVernay and directors, I feel bad because Nickel Boys was actually written like as a book before, and I watched an interview with the author. I think it's because again, I'm I'm ashamed to say I don't know a lot of directors by name, to be honest. I'd be like, okay, that movie was directed really well. And you know the big name people like David, is it David
Steven
Spielberg?
Spielberg.
I don't know why. See, my brain is just not functioning today. I was like, that I can't mess up that name. But like Martin Scorsese, these people, like you
Right.
know them and you know their films, but there are other filmmakers who are so amazing and they they do their craft so well. I just don't know them by name. I'll just be like, oh, that person who wrote or directed this film did an amazing job. And I think that's one of the faults of kind of not showcasing people who write and direct or even the crew members. That's what I think is very frustrating. Like you see people, which I think actors, especially like the ones that perform really well, should definitely get their credit, get, give credit where credit's due. But it's also like why aren't we seeing more of the writers and the directors and the people that helped create the film up on that platform? Because you'll learn so much from them. You'll understand why a scene is lit that way, a shot is lit that way, why the cameras moved in the way that they did. You find that from the director, but as well as you'll find that as well from the DP and for the people who actually set up the lighting. So I think it sucks that you don't see a lot of their input in, you know, showcased in interviews and places like Jimmy Fallon or whoever else is out there, you know. But yeah, I mean, I think it's always fun to kind of check out who created what and their impact on me. But I always lead with Ava DuVernay. I always say her. Like she never gets old. It's just her.
No, and I think what she's done has really been amazing and like you said, impactful and also just you know, purposeful. You know, it's not just entertaining. And again, not that just entertaining is bad, but I think there's something especially moving about things that are based in even for the stories that aren't necessarily true stories, but stories that are based in real world issues and you know current day things that we can relate to, you know, in what's going
And I
on.
was gonna say, like, entertaining stories are amazing, right? But having it have a purpose just makes it that much better. You feel like that's your legacy as a filmmaker, leaving a film or show behind, whatever the project may be. If it has purpose, then you've left something meaningful behind. It doesn't have to be just, oh, I watched Sharknado 5 and found that entertaining, which honestly I don't. I don't understand the movies. I think there's a lot of films. I think people actually just love that movie, but there's a lot of films out there that people love to hate
Hmm.
and then hate to love. But I always say this, but if it's like if I'm ever blessed enough to, and this is not like the main reason I would want to win an Oscar is to be on that stage and to kind of rep my faith and be like, okay, I'm taking back these words that you have put in so many films and have made it negative, which is of the most beautiful words we have in our religion are words like Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, La ilaha illallah, Wallahu Akbar. And I'm sure you've heard of Allahu Akbar because it's been placed in so many movies by so many bad people in the films. So if I was ever blessed enough to win an Oscar, um, I always say like I wouldn't want to win it for having made something really dumb or like just entertaining and I'm not saying mentioning like Scooby-Doo is not like Scooby-Doo. Just I was gonna be like just like a talking dog or something, like a film about a talking dog because that's the only thing I could think of. I would want it to be for something that I stand on and for something that is gonna create change and hopefully create um that conversation for people to have of maybe what I've seen my entire life is wrong. So yeah, I mean, again, entertainment is always fun, but I don't want to. I feel like I waste my time a lot of entertainment as is, so might as well have it mean something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's one of the kind of interesting and sometimes frustrating aspects of the industry is that, I mean, just talking about Oscars, it's like the movies that end up being nominated for the Oscars of the time are these very meaningful, purposeful movies, but they don't do well at the box office. You know, they're not what everybody's going to see, you know, and so it's kind of frustrating, I find, you know, with this kind of business aspect that's placed on movies, especially kind of in the indie world, where it's like, but I think even in the industry itself, it's we can't really make art or something that's moving and purposeful when we're just constantly trying to meet some kind of marketing or business uh, kind of metric or whatever. And there's no paint by numbers if we're trying to make something that's moving in this way. And I'm not saying we should just waste lots of money to make interesting stories, but at the same time, I don't know, maybe I am saying that. I don't know. But it's yeah, it's kind of frustrating. I'm curious in terms of where you know you want your career to go since you were talking about being in the early stages, like is there do you want to move into more of kind of an industry or role or because you know Ava DuVernay now has a lot of power in the industry based on the work that she's done, or is it something that you know you kind of want to keep it more you know within your control over what you want to tell and do.
I think it's funny because with the projects that I have done, I've always said, "Oh man, if I had the budget for this, it would be so much better." I'm so happy with the outcome of it, but I always think, okay, for example, if I had the budget of a Netflix film or a Netflix series, I could make something just that much better. But then you forget as well like you said, the people in the powerful places that want to limit what you can do. So I feel like with independent films, you just have more freedom, but you don't always necessarily have the proper resources. And with bigger budget films, you have the resources, but you don't necessarily have the creative freedom with everything. So I think it's hard. I think I know that I love having my creative freedom. And I wonder this all the time. Like I wonder what is my end goal? And I always say I want to be in the industry, but not because I like it. Because I love how I don't know if it's just to say that it's easy to make films when you're in the industry. I just think you have a lot more resources. And like you said, when you build yourself up, somebody like Ava DuVernay, who has a lot of power to kind of create the stories that she wants to create now with her own production company and having after having made a name for herself. So I I do want to pursue the industry more without losing myself. I think that's a big quest because I don't want it if my voice just becomes lost in the crowd and I don't stand on the beliefs that I stand on anymore. But I am tenacious enough to believe that I have thankfully the proper support of my family and my loved ones, and just so far the right mindset that when I do get there, I will I will use it to my advantage and not let it go to waste. You know, that I will do what I have to do to write and direct in the way that I feel like I haven't seen growing up, that I've always wanted to see, you know? So I do want to be in the industry, but again, I know that there's such, I'm not gonna lie, like a lot of toxicities in the industry that I have been afraid to. I think it's that fear of, have you ever heard of like fear of success? So like fear, I'm like, I feel like I kind of have that as well because I don't want to be in an environment that feels very like draining and soul sucking, which I've heard a lot like in the LA life and Hollywood. But if I'm able to have the best of both worlds, which I believe that I am, that is what I would want to pursue. I would want to like have I talk about like, okay, what's the next step? I would love to have a series, like a mini series on Netflix. That's like number one. This is like what I would love to have, like scratch it off the bucket list. Have a show. I'm sure you've also seen Adolescence. Have you seen that show? It was a good show, but that show became, it was a mini series, only 4 episodes, and it was number one on Netflix for a while there too. So I would love to create something again meaningful and that has purpose and that can, I don't know, have the audience leave with something in their minds that they didn't have before, and also be number one. Number one on Netflix for a long time and continue to do that. So it's a mix of everything. But that's the goal that I have so far. That's what I've been thinking about so far.
Um, is there anything in your current work that or in your more upcoming projects that you're really trying to work on or develop as a director?
I think everything. I think anytime I'm working on something, I'm always trying to develop as a director. I'm always wanting to be better in some way. So, and you're always learning. I'm always learning. So, so far, I think I've created maybe, yeah, I think it's a three. One, two, I would say three or a little bit more films that we're done with the crew where I've been able to direct properly because a lot of the times I've done my own projects and directed, but as a one woman band. So I feel like it's harder to kind of grow as a director when you're not just when you're not collaborating with other people because that's a big part of the process. But I want to be able to lead with more confidence, I think. I think that's a big one. And trust in my vision wholeheartedly. I believe that I do, but I think also like the outside noises can kind of warp the my initial vision. So it's about, that's why I say it's so big to allow for collaboration, but also maintaining the the style and the idea you had for your original vision and not having that change to the point where it it's no longer coming from you, but everybody around you. That's I think I'm getting better at that though. I think with especially with my last short film, I felt more just, I don't know how to explain it. I felt more I don't want to say hands-on because I've always been hands-on, but just more, maybe it's the confident, just more confident in how I'm telling people, okay, I want this out of the scene. I want this out of the scene. I want this out of the shot. Rather than be like, okay, what do you think? You know, like, what do you think? Do you think that's good? I'm like, I don't want to be a timid director. No, that's not okay. So I think it's just gotten better, and hopefully it'll continue to progress as I work on more films. And I think that's another reason why um, I'm okay with where I am now. I do want to figure out how I can, how we were saying, like going into the industry, how I can talk to people that I can create something that becomes more visible to a broader audience. but I also know you have to be very headstrong and know what you want. And I feel like I'm getting better with that, thankfully, and just maintaining that originality of the project and why I wanted to create it in the first place.
Has there been anything or any time where you felt like, I don't know, you totally screwed something up, or a cautionary tale that you had with, something that happened that you were part of, or something that you've learned along the way so far that you would want to either tell your younger self, or tell upcoming filmmakers to kind of be mindful of?
I think it's less about a specific moment and more about mentality, which is what I had mentioned right before, that just trust in yourself and trust in your work and be around people that are really supportive and truly passionate um, about the project that you're trying to create because that's important. And like you said, a lot of stuff goes wrong when you're trying to work on something, especially in the indie world, when you don't have the budget to kind of fix it right off the bat. So you need to work with people who are really down to stick with you through the nitty-gritty of things. I'm trying to think. I don't think there's this, again, there's not probably a specific moment that I can think of currently because like I mentioned before, my last short film just had the hardest pre-production phase than my other films. But I feel like, for example, Kofia was and that was one of my short films that went really well. The production was awesome, but I think the way that my mindset was as a director was I'm not doing enough right now. And I think it's just because everybody's working around me and I didn't, but that's also because it was going so well that I felt like I'm not doing anything. I'm just standing there like, what now? So, so that's why I always say truly be confident in yourself. And I think I've also heard you say this in your videos, but why are you doing this? What is the why to everything? And my why, I know my why. So be reminded of what is your why. So that also helps you maintain that like discipline and motivation and tenacity to create what you need to create and go through the phases that are very daunting at times and very can be very trivial, and especially on like when you're going through the production it could be very tedious. So just knowing your reason and then sticking by it and hopefully finding the right people to work with, I would say that's very important in your journey as a writer director. Well, director more than writing, because writing you're usually solo in your room and and just chilling by yourself, trying to sit in front of a blank page, like what now? But yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Um, oh, I lost my train of thought. Are is there something is there something that you feel like you have to have with you, especially during production, or really, but in any phase? Like, is there something that you need on set, or want on set, or need that helps you kind of focus, or even just enjoy the process of being in production?
I think from the technical sides of things, you just want to be prepared. That helps. Being prepared and having done the rehearsals and being on the same page with everybody, working with awesome people and people that trust in your vision, that that's like a recipe for an amazing production, hopefully. Um, I don't think I need like a specific object, but I do need to be in a space spiritually for me to kind of work on it. So I'm always prior to any film production, especially while I'm stressing, I'm always like praying about it and making supplication, which is like we call it dua in Islam, where you're just like talking to God and you're asking for things and praying for things. But I remember as well for my like last short film because we had to be on set from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. So we pray 5 times a day in Islam. And I know that I had to be up early to kind of get there. And the first prayer of the day is Fajr prayer, which is a morning prayer. And that's before the sun rises. Sorry, some people. The sun rises. And I prayed on set. So I'm like, I would tell them too. I was like, that's one of the things that I like to create a space where people can practice in comfort, especially as a Muslim. Like it's I know when I'm working on a set, it's like, okay, I have to ask somebody. It's like, hey, are you guys cool? I have to pray real quick. And they're usually very kind about it. So making sure the crew has that space to do that is very important to me. I went aside and I like prayed the prayers that I needed, and I just kind of sat down there for a second while they were setting up and just I made dua. I was like, oh God, please let it go well. Please let it go well. If anything, if there's anything that I need to learn from this, I'm okay with it, but just let it end well. Even if it's like hard. I mean, I'm always like, God, please let it be easy throughout. But if it isn't, let it at least let the end result, the end of it all be good. And like that we didn't suffer for nothing on the day of the shoot. So it's really just for me spirituality and maintaining that phase because I always say this, but I would not be able to do this job if I didn't have it. It's just too much. This is a very overstimulating, just stressful job as it is, and that's just part of the job. I remember somebody, I was like, oh, I'm stressing over this. They're like, okay, are you willing to accept the fact that your line of work is just going to always be stressful no matter what you do? It's just that's how it is. I'm like, I don't do well with stress though. I'm not used to it. I like the Zen vibe. And they're like, but if you're going to do this, that's just the work that it is. And I'm like, oh yeah, whatever. I'm okay with the stress, I guess. Um, but if there was if there's something that I need to have with me, it's just that state of mind. And that's just being in that faithful state of mind. Or else it feels like it's shallow. The work is shallow. And it feels like I'm not doing it for any other reason other than myself and having my own film out there, having my name on it. And I try to step away, and it's hard, right? Especially as filmmakers, you want to be recognized. You need your name to be recognized to be able to create better projects and have the resources. But I truly try not to have it be an ego thing. If I catch myself making it into this thing where it's like I'm really just thinking of myself and nothing else, and I'm like, Shahd, like you need to take a take a break. Like stop, think about what you're thinking about right now. Do you really want to be like in that state of mind? So that's always been important to me, and that's one of the things that as I mentioned before, I don't want to lose as I hopefully grow and have my films because I want it to be less about me and more about the work that I do. So have my films, God willing, be more recognized to the public, inshallah.
Mm, awesome. Yeah. Well, is there kind of what brought you to filmmaking? I mean, anything that you kind of made you think, yeah, I want to make films or tell stories in this way? Like what inspired you to do this?
Well, I always reference my time in high school in my AVP class, audio video production course. I don't know, maybe it was I don't know, I don't want to say it's like an ego thing, but maybe because I was like asked to come back the following year to the advanced class. I was like, oh, maybe I'm like good enough to actually pursue this. And I always enjoyed storytelling, even though it's always been difficult for me. It's always been stressful, and not the storytelling aspect of it, but the production aspect of it. And I never considered myself good with stress, but I think again it's gotten easier, and but I just loved storytelling, and I think that's something you'll hear from everybody. If you don't love the storytelling part of filmmaking, then you're really not gonna enjoy filmmaking because you're doing your best to create a visual of what that story is and how to have the audience connect to these character and the emotions of the film. So I just love storytelling. I love that I can create emotions in an audience, as I said so many times. But with Ava DuVernay, because I um, left my room feeling depressed for a whole week or however long it's been. I know like if I'm able to create that in somebody else, then that's real power there. And you can't really mimic that in anything else. You can try. I think art in general can do that and can create emotions in people, but there's just something really special and magical about films that when you go in and you have this experience, you can leave. I think people like to call it the grieving phase, where you're just thinking about this film all the time. Or maybe it's because I'm specifically thinking about shows when that ends, you're just kind of like, oh, you're grieving that it's over. I remember I felt that after finishing Breaking Bad. I was like, no, it's done. And I remember thinking after the final episode, this is why I was kind of happy they also did like that film, El Camino, because even though it wasn't like action filled and it was more slow and um all that stuff, you felt like it tied up any loose ends from the series that I was like, oh man, this is just not there's no closure. For me, it didn't feel like closure in that last episode. So that's why I think I call it the grieving phase, but just just allowing people to feel what they feel and being the person that created that. It's so like wow. It's such a strong feeling. I don't even know how to explain it, but that's why I do it
Yeah.
and what I love.
We were just talking about that in my class, and I was talking about that's our job as filmmakers is to manipulate our audience and make them feel things
Mhm.
and
That's why,
it's
yeah,
yeah,
sorry. I was just gonna say, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no,
That's why I hate when, and I think we've mentioned this in class, like way back in the day, but back in the day, a couple years down the line. But when continuity changes in film and it takes you out of that, um, the experience. So I know there's this film that I was watching yesterday. It's a Korean film called Believer, and they had a second one, but they changed the main actor who was in the film. I was like, how are you going to change the main actor? It doesn't make sense. And I can't like follow along. Like I still wanted to check out certain clips because the way the first film ended, it's kind of an open ending way that they like you don't know what happened really. So in the second one, there's a better explanation of what happened. But I'm like, why did you change the main character? I think the actor was great, but it just takes you out of that realm. So why? Why? When continuity is messed up, it messes you up and you don't want to continue watching. So I think it's in order to have that experience, that's such a big play in it, is to be able to, like you said, trick. I don't like saying trick, but it's true. Like you gotta like create this sense of false reality for people and have them just get sucked into the work.
yeah, definitely, yeah, it is such, I mean, I think the most powerful medium, and again, like we were talking about earlier, incorporating that purpose to it, I think there's you know, it's a responsibility, you know, because it is so influential and because it is so powerful. You know, it can certainly be used for like you were talking about earlier, like propaganda purposes. You know, it's just it convinces people so easily because we believe what we're seeing. You know, we think that it's real, and but it's only a little slice of whatever the truth is, you know, or you know, and it might even be manipulated beyond that. So now with this world of AI and everything,
But it's fun, like seeing some of the AI I will say there's a lot of stuff that tricks us now with AI. I'm like, but I know right off the bat, like this is not real because you know the person or whatever is happening that would not happen. You're like, this is fake. But when you're checking it out, it does look real. It's scary. It's scary. Like imagine if that's the thing, right? If we were that popular and well known. Imagine that's terrifying to me to imagine somebody kind of creating a fake AI version of me and having it say something that I would never say or condone something I would never condone. But then you kind of expect you want people to be smart enough to be like, would this person actually say this? From given what you see and the image of this person, would they actually say this? So you're right, 100% AI is like crazy, crazy.
What do you think about the future of filmmaking or this kind of medium or art form or career or yeah, especially since you're kind of just starting out like with
Yeah.
these new advances, like what are some of the things you're thinking about or worried about or hopeful?
Well, hopefully robots won't take our jobs. But um I don't know. I feel like the technology is helping us create better stories. And it makes it hopefully easier and maybe even more budget friendly or maybe more expensive. I can't tell because I'm not into the technical because I know there's a lot of people that kind of like dive into the technical sides of the filmmaking in the industry. But I know like that virtual, what do you call it? You know, the virtual screen.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
think they used it in The Mandalorian.
Hmm.
And I've seen that done with this Muslim imam who has his own kind of production series. I'm like, how that's so awesome that he was able to get out there. How they is it that I don't think it's that expensive if like I mean I'm not saying that their budget isn't good, but to have it and to be able to use it and use it the same way people in like big time productions do, I think it's really cool. So mm, I don't know. I know this is like a weird reference and maybe it's not the same to your question, but I used to always imagine like it would be so cool if I had like telekinesis and maybe be able to like use my telekinesis to move the camera around like I want to because it's just so much easier than having the setup. That's what you think, right? You're like, have you seen the film Chronicles
Hmm.
with the with Michael B. Jordan and the two
Hmm.
other guys? I feel bad, two other guys. They're known actors. I just don't remember their name. And they would like the guys would move the camera. The main character would move the camera with his hand. So I was like, that would be so cool. Rather than having like a crane or something, I could just make it fly and make it move around like I want it to. But I don't know. I've seen some advanced camera work in the industry now. I think as long as you've got the same people working and you're giving jobs and you're giving the proper income to the people, because I know there was like the writer strike and um all this stuff happening in the industry. So as long as you're taking care of the people that are doing the work, then hopefully high hopes. Hopefully it's not going to be crazy. But yeah, I don't think about it a crazy amount, so I don't know all too much. And then that's another thing, like with the show Adolescence, right? They had the whole series filmed with one camera shot. It's so cool. And I know that they mentioned how long it took them, I think months to rehearse that. So that alone is very advanced um for a film or a show to do. So I think it's just gonna progress as we go forward, but hopefully progress for the better.
Yeah, I think about some of those things and I always feel like as a director, like for me the technical part of the what the camera can do or how we could shoot something, especially the moving part of it, is the part that I am kind of working on more. I feel like the most limited in terms of like my vision of things, and because I think about things like, well, who came up with the idea to shoot adolescents as like a one shot, or there's a shot in the middle of Children of Men, if you've seen that movie, where they're driving and they get kind of ambushed, and the shot is crazy, and they basically like put a remote camera on like a pole in the middle of the car so it could kind of like rotate amongst the four or five the I think there are five people in a car. And so the camera and then at some point like the camera, like somebody gets ejected from the car and the camera like comes out of the car. I mean, it's just like insane what this camera does.
Yeah.
And how, like, who thought of that? Like, how did that idea, like those are some of the things where sometimes I'm like, that's a side where when I look at other people's stuff, I'm like, I like to incorporate that more, think about things more in that way. And
Yeah.
I wonder like how, you know, what are some of the things that you think about for your work where you're kind of like, oh, I'd like to incorporate this or do something
I
different.
think it's also because when we're thinking about working on a project or creating our next story, it's usually limited because of the budget.
Mm,
So we think more realistically. And this is what everybody tells you, think of what you can do, not what you can't. But
right.
I think we should allow ourselves to branch out and really think of the craziest things that we can film because that's where that imaginative camera work comes into play. And you're practicing what you can do. Hopefully you could even find methods to do it or bring it as close as possible to your vision. But when I just feel like I'm also like that. I've limited my productions and like the filming in my head to what I can do, but I want to just do more of what I can't do and just put my mind into those places so I can actually create, hopefully create that. And like you said, just bring it to when we do have the proper budget. That's actually a question I would like to ask you. For me, it's like there are a lot of camera movements that I wanted to. I was thinking about that recently. Like if I do something else next or whatever, I want to implement more creative camera work because a lot of my projects are either on like handheld or tripod. It's just not a lot of crazy camera movements, which I think work for the stories 100%. But I want to be more playful with it because that's the only way you'll learn and progress as well. So there are shots that I think are really cool when I see it online, or sorry, when I see it in shows. So I feel like a lot of the times when I talk with people, I'm very repetitive. I love Korean dramas. I think I've said that a million times. And there are shows that I remember watching, they're just like scenes where the camera work is really cool. So there's this one show I watched recently, and there was this kid who kind of like tried to he was playing a mind game with his stepbrother, and he was going to try to allow himself to fall off the roof. It's weird. You have to watch it to know what's happening, but he kind of before he does that, he kind of leans into his stepbrother's face and the camera leans and it feels very intimidating and intimate as well because you're just so close to them and you see that distorted movement of the camera. I just remember thinking, "Oh, that's so cool. I like how that looked." And there was another show that had a lot of amazing camera work. I love the cinematography in general, the colors. It's a history period drama, and there was this one scene where it was a fight scene between these two guys, and they flipped on the ground, like they rolled over, and the camera rolled as well. So I thought that was really cool, and to be able to create something where you're just able to keep the audience on their feet is so amazing. That's I mean, again, like most, I'm trying to think of like my personal stuff. Again, it's not, it has, so far, it has been pretty on the line. It hasn't been anything hectic or crazy, but it's something that I want to pursue more in the future. Just being more hmm, unpredictable with the camera work. I think that's fun. I do like the whole maintaining that one camera shot for a whole scene. I really like those. Um, with adolescents, I liked how they did it, and I think it's amazing. But I think because it is unedited in that sense, and it's really just from the camera to the production, sorry, to the editing software, it's more slow paced. So unless there's like a lot of action happening, you're gonna be like you're gonna have to force yourself to kind of stay in it. And that's why I feel like if I were to do that, I would maintain a certain amount of time where I keep it in one shot and mostly shots that are very just compelling and something that people can keep their eye on. Mhm,
Yeah, definitely. I do think that that's a risk with the one shots, the
mhm.
oneers, where you just it's so dependent on performance and what's going on in the story, and it either, works or it doesn't work. And sometimes that can also be very subjective. I
Yeah.
do think that adolescence struggles, I mean, with the pacing, in that sense, where I mean, again, it's compelling, but we're also not used to it, anymore, which is why the oneer can be so exciting because you're like,
Yeah.
oh my God, like we haven't cut at all. But I think and I've seen really amazing oneers, and there was one of the TV shows, I think, like the Haunting of Hill House, or one of those haunting TV shows. There was a oneer episode for the funeral of one of the characters,
Mhm.
and it was just phenomenal. But it was kind of like, again, the movement of things, and it just kept you in it. I struggled a little bit with adolescence with the pacing, where I was kind of like, I don't really need to be walking from this car to the house, and like just.
I
But
yeah. I think it's funny because there's a lot of shows that come to mind that have done like a scene, right? Not the
yeah,
whole thing, but like a scene. I'm thinking of shows like 13 Reasons Why,
yeah,
On My
yeah,
Block. I can refer to one scene where they had a full camera shot, all done on one camera. I do think, like you said, with adolescence, like I know the first episode, I was really into it because I was so intrigued. I wanted to know what happened. I think by the second episode, I was like, eh. The third episode, I also was intrigued. I really liked the episode with the boy and the therapist. I thought that was really interesting. And then the last episode, I think it was here and there. Like I definitely felt it in some scenes because that last episode was the aftermath of what happened to the kid with his family. So, and I know the actors did such an amazing job, but I know there was a scene where I think for like 12 minutes they were just like the family was talking to one another and it was just the camera stuck on the car. And I completely understand what they were trying to do. And I think some people would have found that scene to be very moving and just beautiful to have this family. I personally am like, I I'm okay not seeing this because I like my attention span isn't great either. So I can move it, but there were scenes where the dad was really emotional with the mom that honestly broke my heart, especially the last scene. The last shot of the dad, which is a spoiler if you
yeah. Don't
haven't seen
spoil
the
it.
show,
Yeah.
but the last scene where he starts to cry thinking about his son and kind of tucks in the bear in on his son's bed. It was so moving. It was so heart. Like it really I remember not the first time, but I watched that clip later again. I don't know why. Sometimes when you watch it over, it makes you more emotional. And I cried. And I was like, oh my God, this is so sad. Because he's treating the bear and he's apologizing to the bear like it's his son. And of course, that's all done through like that one shot.
Mm.
Uh, but I remember I'm trying to think of something specific. Uh, I think it's just some stuff they when they do the one shot technique. Oh, I think I was gonna ask you actually, aside from the one shot technique, when you're working on like emotional scenes and you're working with camera angles or scenes that are just very like the climax of whatever it is that you're making, what do you take into account when you're trying to figure out what shots to use?
Yeah. So, I mean, I usually have a particular kind of image, or kind of a representational image for that scene that kind of focuses how I plan coverage and things like that. And so, like, um, like there's a scene in Acid Test where, she finds out she got into this college, um, and like for me it was all about kind of like her and this kind of closed in kind of moment. So even though her parents were in the scene, I
Mhm.
wanted to kind of crop them out, like they're like, you see their bodies but they're cut off like at the shoulders or something. And when we were shooting it, somebody was like, oh, it's like Peanuts, like the cartoon where it's like the adults are just like want, like you can't actually hear what the adults are saying. They're And you never really like see their faces.
Yeah.
And so there are things like that where it's like, whatever the emotion of the scene is, there's usually some kind of image that feels representational, and then I kind of focus the coverage and the shot list kind of around, and the storyboard kind of around how do we build into it. But sometimes things are also completely accidental and a product of what happened on set. So we actually have a 6 minute oneer in acid test, which was not planned, which kind of sounds crazy because you would think it would need to be planned. But we had scheduled this scene where the father and daughter kind of have this confrontation over her college essay. And I had planned for, traditional kind of coverage.
Mhm.
And, but we had scheduled it for the end of our day and we were just running out of time. And this is where, for me, and you've mentioned collaborating a lot, where and again, when I mentioned that I feel kind of limited sometimes when I think about the visuals of things, because it usually does feel condensed into kind of a representational image and not necessarily like a movement or a camera thing.
Mhm.
And so that's where I rely on collaborating with my DP a lot, where I'm kind of like, this is the feeling that I'm going for. How can we now kind of add to it with what's possible from the camera? And we had been shooting a different scene earlier in the day where we had this like Dana dolly and the camera was kind of like sliding back and forth. And so we were kind of like, okay, let's just put the camera back on this Dana dolly and we're going to kind of come into it and then push in and just do the scene and not shoot any coverage. And so it was kind of like, it was a gamble, it was a risk, and we took like 5 takes. And I think the performances were fine in each one of them. I think we had focus issues in almost every single one except for the last one. Um, and I think it works really well, and most people think it works really well. But I did have somebody that was like, "I hope you have coverage on that scene" when they saw the edit, and I was like, "Nope, we got nothing. Like this is the shot. We're fully committed." And uh, so I don't know. Sometimes you just it happens.
Yeah. And that's what I was gonna like that comment, that one person's comment that can kind of derail
Right?
what you're thinking. But I would be like, you know what? I know you know what you're going for when you did that and you took the risk. And I don't remember the scene, but I remember specifically like you had that scene where the girl was kind of hallucinating and seeing, I don't know if it was numbers or if it was like
Yeah,
gold.
yeah,
I thought that was like really cool. She was kind of like playing with it and
yeah.
poking at it. So at the end of the day, like you said, you know what you are going for. And as long as you're happy with it. And that's the thing, because might be happy with something and then somebody says something else, and that kind of takes you off um your cloud nine feeling. So forget that. Forget all that. But no, I was gonna also ask, what would you say is like the craziest or the most intense scene you've had to show, you'd have to, oh my God, you had to shoot where you took into account like the camera work, but also the performance?
Well, I think some of the crazy stuff was definitely the hallucinating stuff where the dad was very angry. And part of that was actually very technical because what I wanted was to be able to kind of intercut and make this surreal moment where the performance level is jumping from like a concerned father to like a totally enraged father to like somewhere in between.
Mhm.
And so as a director, typically I'm doing kind of natural human. You want it to be as natural or realistic as what somebody might be doing in real life. And this was very technical in the sense where I was kind of like, you know, from the from say the dad's actor's perspective, the enraged, crazy monster dad um, wasn't actually from his perspective as a character, it was from the daughter's perspective. And so, directing an actor and being like, you know, you just have to be a crazy monster because that's how she sees you, and it has nothing based in necessarily the reality of how he or
Hmm.
his character sees himself.
Yeah.
um that was I think challenging, in many ways, and then again trying to kind of add into it camera movements and the visual effects of the hallucinations going on. And so that was difficult. And then anything kind of with crowds or people, just a lot of bodies to move around and trying to get kind of the shot that you're looking for and things like that.
I
But from
remember,
a performance
yeah, sorry, I was just gonna say, I remember you telling me, or I don't remember who, but Kate was the one to do the scene in the in with the concert. I can't remember if it was like a concert scene or if it was like the music band scene when she was carrying the camera and kind of moving around. So I'm guessing like a lot
Yeah,
of that
Kay. Yeah.
is
Yeah,
like,
yeah, Kay was, I mean, and that was just such an amazing thing because she had this, big red on her shoulder, and she's like moving through this crowd and trying to get these shots. And we had our gaffer was actually like spotting her half the time, and I'm kind of like moving around with her trying to get it. And so yeah, all those kinds of scenes were fun, but also just physically taxing. So, but yeah, it's I don't know. I do love that collaborative aspect to it. So,
I think it's that's why I always say you have to make sure you have the right people because sometimes it's, and I think that's something that I just feel like I need to know, right? Because I'm not always, I'm thinking that I'm the one who kind of, I know what I want out of the scene. So I want to create the shots. And a lot of the time you have the shots in your head, but there are moments where you're just kind of like, how can I get that emotion out of the scene, like you mentioned, and what shots, and how can we make it more creative, more fun? But for some reason, I feel like I'm the one who has to kind of come up with that on my own. But you kind of forget that collaboration with the DP who knows how to set up something really awesome that he or she knows that you would love. So collaborating is always just amazing, and being able to trust people with your vision is something like no other. But I will always, I also brought that up because I know there's a show that I want to, a mini series that I want to write. I still have not wrote yet because it's very very intense and I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do with it or how I want to create it. But essentially the log line would be like it, and this is very, I don't know, like if you would put like a trigger warning about it, but it's about like a 15-year-old who gets raped by his brother's best friend or like oldest friend. So I I think about certain scenes, so even though I haven't created it yet, you think about certain moments, scenes, details of how you want to write it. And I know that the actual scene of that happening, I've thought about it. It's like, how do I want to do it where I'm not? I know that honestly, I don't want to show that moment in itself happening, but how can I show it without showing it? And then also making it, because sometimes I'm 100% when you people say like it's important to show everything, but a lot of the like subtext is it plays a major role in storytelling. So I think in my idea, I wanted to create this character who loves to draw, who loves to sketch. Now, the kind of sketching or the kind of drawing, I have yet to decide, but I think at one point I was thinking maybe he would draw cartoons, and in the beginning, he would kind of envision these cartoons moving, like they are real. And maybe that in that scene when that happens, they like the cartoons on his wall, like something happens with that where maybe they no longer move because that innocence is taken away or something like that. Something I've thought of different ways. It's just like trying to pinpoint how to make it happen without glamorizing it, because I know that even though I really did like that scene with 13 Reasons Why, but they took it out because they said it was just too more like it's too much, and a lot of accidents and a lot of intentional, suicides were happening because of that scene. So I personally, as somebody who has no experience feeling that way or anything, I really liked watching it, but I can imagine somebody who isn't in the right mindset watching it and get triggered by it. So I know that that's not something that I want to create with how I want to make the show or how I want to, oh my God, I can't speak anymore. I can't. I am no longer able to talk, but how I want to create that emotion. And I don't know, it's just about trying to navigate what the best way would be. And I wanted to know what your thoughts on something like that would be, how you
Yeah.
would go about
No, I think that's really interesting. And I think to a certain extent, when you were saying earlier, like, oh, well, if I had Netflix money, this would
it.
be so much better. But then again, the flip side is you would maybe have less creative control. At the same time, I also feel like if I had Netflix money, it wouldn't necessarily make anything better because I think the creative choices we have to make when we have less time, less money, less, like I wouldn't have a 6 minute oneer, which I think is amazing in my film if I hadn't kind of run into it. You know what I mean? Like, um, and so I think these creative ideas of like the moving comics that stop because of the loss of it, thinking about it from this metaphoric standpoint. I mean, that is what film is representational, in that sense. Like it is a metaphor, and we are, creating these fake characters and fake situations and fake locations and a fake storyline. And even if it's based on something true, our creation of it is false, and we're trying to get people to believe that what we're seeing is true and to empathize, like you said, and to believe and feel and identify with whatever's going on and learn from it or think about things differently. But it's through this artifice, it's through this kind of fakery, or trickery, and I think that that's fascinating, but also gives us this opportunity to kind of think outside the box. And so having these challenges, like you said, of telling a story where you've got this kind of brutal moment or intimate moment, or things like that, where it's like, how do we convey this emotion or tell this story point in a way that's going to affect our audience without necessarily traumatizing them? Because I certainly think there was a period of time in the early 2000s where it was kind of like, with Game of Thrones or, anything where it's like, we're just going to put trauma stuff, trigger warnings everywhere, like we're just going to be as explicit as possible and put it in your face. And, to a certain extent, if you look through the history of even plays or movies or things like that, like sometimes in horror movies, the scariest thing you can't see. It's off camera. Like as soon as we show the monster, we're like, oh, really? Like that's how you decided to do it? Like that's not scary at all. But if it's hidden, if it's off camera, if it's something that it kind of makes you think more about it, it triggers those feelings much more intensely. And so I think to think about these kind of, and then there's also a human or realistic quality where like people going through trauma do dissociate. So you can have these crazy surreal things happening in a traumatic moment that are completely contrary to what's happening in the moment, but it's how the mind is protecting itself. And so the more you can tap into the truth and the psychology and the behavior of these kinds of moments, the more you might have these unexpected visual kind of ideas for how to direct either the performance or the camera movement or both, or all those things. And so I think those are the types of things where, again, time is your friend. You don't want to rush those kinds of things because if you really want to tell something nuanced and true and affecting, I think it has to take the time that it takes to figure out how you want to tell it. So,
100%. Yeah, I know that with like you said, the more you find out, and I know it's terrible to say, but the more, for example, um, like you've seen Iman, I wrote a feature for that. And the more that I learn about the history of what happened during the Nakba, the more it helps the story. It sucks and it's terrible and horrendous that something like that would happen in reality, but you know that it brings aid to the film that you're trying to create because I don't like saying it, but it just adds more compelling moments for people to kind of, I don't even want to say relate to the character, but feel and understand the character and the situation they're in. So, especially with like this kind of series, I know that when I watch shows or films that are kind of in that realm of SA and mental health, sometimes you're like, man, I would do something like this if I saw it. And it's not, you don't even have any, for somebody who has like, no one-on-one like understanding of that mindset and that experience, you can kind of understand maybe one of the emotions. So feeling suffocated in a sense, you're like, okay, I've felt that before. And this is how I would see it if it were a visual. I had this idea with that I wanted, and it was just like, I don't know if I want to make it, but it was just like this idea I had of doing this short where a girl is kind of, mind you, should be fully clothed in a bathtub in water and just kind of like that's also the mindset of somebody who's grieving, you know, they're not in their right mind and she's kind of singing a song and she's in tears because she had lost somebody in Palestine. And so it's this true like visual of somebody who's experienced loss, who feels suffocated, who feels like nothing is right in the world. And then she kind of, what do you call it? Like drops into the water and ends up in like this ocean of water because that's also like this metaphorical aspect of her suffocating and drowning in her emotions. And again, as somebody who only understands from empathy rather than my own personal, you know, ways of going through things, I can kind of put an emotion to it and see how I can create a visual out of it. So I think that's a lot of it. And then I actually want to understand, like you said, more about what these characters are going through, no matter what story I'm telling. So if I'm telling this personal story, and I think I've gone on Facebook to like the survivors group page and I reached out to people like, hey, if you like are willing to kind of talk about what you experience, because male survivors is different than female survivors in many ways, right? There's like the stigma against males going through this kind of just like having something like this happen to them. And they delved into it in that show, the Menendez brothers, right? Like just a guy like this happening to men. It's not possible. It's they're like, how could this happen to them and whatnot? And then adding that identity aspect of it, of them being, because I wanted to create, because at first I wanted to create a story where they're Hispanic, because it's just like it plays more into how the perpetrator can have like one up, like on a different level. He can kind of use that to his advantage, you know, that like, you know, threaten to get them deported or whatnot. But I'm like, I don't understand enough about Hispanic culture to create that kind of setting. And I would rather write what I know, as you've heard many times before. So I would want to make them possibly of like, I think Palestinian Syrian descent. That way it just delves into a whole other culture and a whole other set of problems you'll find in that culture of male survivors, and then also making them, you know, Muslim, and then finding ways of having faith play a role into this person's healing afterwards. So again, it just takes a lot to kind of understand the characters you're going through, or sorry, the characters that you are writing. And I think another thing is when you're writing, right? I'm sure I don't know if you, well, I'm sure every writer has had this, but writing and trying to understand the characters that you're creating, writing in their words, writing their dialogue. You're like, how am I going to write a 15-year-old, a 15-year-old dialogue? I would tell my brother who's 17, I was like, man, like, tell me what are the terminologies nowadays? What's going on in high school? He's like, I don't understand 15-year-olds. I'm like, bro, you're 17. Like, you're not that far off. So trying to understand and really relate to the characters. And I've heard many people talk about how once you know your characters, writing them is like writing their dialogue just comes so much becomes so much easier. I don't know, like, do you feel that way too?
Yeah, I definitely um feel like, yeah, just understanding kind of different people and listening to people. I mean, I think especially as a writer, listening to conversations, listening to how people speak, thinking about things from different perspectives, doing whatever research, it definitely helps. I definitely know when I haven't done enough research or, haven't figured out my character when I'm starting to write and I get kind of stuck in like a small detail, like either how would they say this or what would they wear? There's just something where I'm like trying to write a simple stage direction or have a conversation. I kind of like stumble a bit. I'm like, oh, okay, I actually need to figure out this character a little bit more. But so yeah, I definitely think that helps. But I also think that that helps as a director
Mm.
because I've, I already know kind of who these characters are, and the actors are just kind of deepening or adding another element to it. And that was one of the things I found interesting about directing too for my latest short because I didn't write it and I had to like figure out how to get into it as a director because I was struggling a little bit because I hadn't written it. It was like I had to kind of figure out these characters, you know, in a new way, which was part of why I did it, but I found it kind of an interesting stumbling block. So,
And it's also a disservice to the characters and to people who actually go through what they've gone through if you don't do your research and
of
understand.
course, yeah.
Because I know that this is something I've mentioned before, but I've talked about like Islamophobia in
Mm.
films. And a lot of it comes from the propaganda, but there are people out there that just, there's so much ignorance and nobody wants to take the time to understand, like, hey, what is the hijab? Why does this person put it on? Why um why do we necessarily have to make this person who somebody who's oppressed, why does she want to take it off because she sees a dude over there who's looking cute, or she has to go to her family and start fighting? I'm like, do you not know Muslims at all? Like, the percentage of people you are talking about is so like little compared to the amount of people that put the hijab on, the women that put it on for the sake of worship and because they love their faith. But you don't see that because people don't look into it. And they'll, again, that's why you see like a lot of brown people, the face of terrorism and whatnot. They'll be like, oh, who are the race of people we want to put under the bus that we've seen one or two incidents of in the past, but we don't want to kind of go into vice versa. It's so funny because I always talk about how in Western films, everybody is the bad guy except like the country that you're actually in. Like, they never create um like white supremacy as the bad guys as much. I mean, they do it, but again, it stems from other countries, like a white supremacy coming from Germany or coming from here, or Russia, or the Russians are the bad guys, the Asians are the bad guys, the black people are the bad guys, the Arabs. I'm like, guys, do y'all not know the history of where we live? I'm sorry, like, that's the reality of it. But you never want to again, that's the propaganda of it all. So understanding and looking into and taking the time to know what it is you're writing is so important. That's why I also don't, that was one of the most nerve-wracking things of writing E-Man and then also writing the short, sorry, not the short, the feature, because I'm writing about something that actually happened, which is the Nakba. And so many lives were lost and so many tragedies occurred and so many things that is even hard to kind of talk about that happened there. But I don't want to do a disservice to that piece of history that a lot of people don't know about. And even though this character is fictional and her story is fictional, there are many stories that are similar and have gone through even worse than what I'm writing about. So I just want to make sure that I'm doing my part in seeking that knowledge. And I think that's important with anything that you're writing, especially like again something that has to do with essay and um, male survivors. Something as I don't know how common it is because I haven't looked into that as much, but I do know there's a difference again from a guy experiencing essay and a girl experiencing it. So yeah, just knowing the facts and then taking what you know to create this fictional scenario of these people and this world that you're trying to make essential.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we've gone kind of to the I usually keep these about an hour, so we've been talking for a bit. So I again thank you so much for doing this. And I yeah, always love talking to you about it. I was telling somebody else, I was like, it's just a nice excuse to talking, to be able to talk to people about, what we love and what we're interested in. So wanted to see if you had any final words and then we'll sign off.
Well, again, thank you for having me. It's funny because I feel like I talk a lot, and I feel like you're not the first person to say like I've kind of gone over the what people not like that, but I mean like most people are like, oh, this is the longest interview I've done. I'm like, yeah, my bad, I talk a lot, and I think I've had that happen a couple of times. I'm like, you know what, we had a good conversation. That's nice.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
No, and I have the same problem, honestly. I could talk forever, so.
dude, if it's funny because even when I'm meeting up with friends, I'm like, y'all have to be the one to kind of be like, let's go, because I will sit and talk for hours. But but no, I mean, I always love talking about this kind of stuff. And, as my former teacher, it's always great to kind of catch up in general and see what you've been doing and see your perspective on these things. So yeah, I mean, this was fun. It was awesome. And check out Twofer, check out Mitamos when they come out. You'll
Yeah.
find it both on our pages somewhere, on our Instagram, on our websites. Be sure to like and support. And yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, good luck finishing it up. And yeah, maybe we'll I'll see you around at some of these networking events and maybe we'll do this again.